A bishop or archbishop is understood in Catholic faith to be a successor of the apostles. He exercises in a particular region or diocese the kind of leadership that the apostles provided in the early church. This involves concern for and authority over the general religious life of the local diocese. All the bishops throughout the world, together with and under the Pope, share a responsibility for the universal church.
I'm not a sportsman because I grew up on a farm, so I never played sports very much. And I must say that the sport that does interest me is baseball. Baseball, you can sit at the edge of your chair for a long time and hope for something, and it doesn't happen.
This avid Blue Jays fan is the spiritual leader of 1.6 million Roman Catholics in Toronto. His name is Archbishop Aloysius Ambrozic. He was chosen by the Pope to lead this dynamic diocese into the next century, a challenge he faces backed by the power of his faith and supported by the strength of his family.
I'm very closely attached to my family. I think we're all rather a tight unit. I know that no matter what happens, my 4 brothers and 2 sisters will be with me. I mean, they may disagree with me, they may be angry with me, but they're still with me.
Archbishop Ambrozic's faith is nurtured by the rich and deep traditions of his church, and it extends to his rare moments of recreation, moments that often include both spiritual and physical challenge.
I need to get physically tired. I mean, that is a psychological necessity for me, because it's only when I am thoroughly physically tired that I am fully relaxed.
When supper was ended, he took the cup. Again, he gave you thanks and praise, gave the cup to his disciples, and said, "Take this, all of you."
First and foremost, Archbishop Ambrozic is a leader of the church, its highest-ranking official in Toronto. And here in the formal setting of St. Michael's Cathedral, he presides over the important services and celebrations of the year, the sacred occasions where ceremony is rich with meaning. It's a time to share with the faithful the timeless message of hope. These are the profound expressions of faith that are perhaps his most visible role. But what most people don't see is the Archbishop's commitment and daily dedication to serving Toronto's Catholics. Like all bishops, he is more than a spiritual leader. He's also an administrator, a manager, a teacher, and a friend. He's a quiet, often shy man who nevertheless gives us this privileged glimpse of his life, personal and private as well as public. Being Archbishop is a demanding and very public job. His few private moments are a time to savor the simple things that keep life in balance. His Grace lives alone. He begins and ends each day with solitary prayer in his upstairs chapel. And each morning he makes his own breakfast. He enjoys this quiet routine. It's a time to collect his thoughts and prepare for the challenges that lie ahead each day. And the scope of those challenges is considerable. He's responsible for the largest diocese in English Canada, the 4th largest in North America, 215 parishes in all. It's so big that it's divided into 4 zones and requires the services of 4 assistant bishops. Then there is the school system he helps guide. It's one of the biggest in Canada. As well, the Archbishop oversees the operation of 27 charities. And the Toronto Diocese is still growing. His Grace has been told he will have to establish 30 new parishes in the next decade. An even bigger challenge will be finding the priests to make this possible. His Grace brings some remarkable talents to the job. He is fluent in 4 languages, and he's studying to learn another 2. That's an important asset in such a multicultural city. In fact, most of the new arrivals he welcomes to the diocese have first languages other than English. And the Archbishop also offers another kind of understanding. He, too, is an immigrant. His family was forced to flee their homeland of Slovenia. Their lives were shattered by the guns of World War II. They found new hope in Canada. There are no limousines, no chauffeurs, just a man like millions of others heading out to work. driving through the city he loves and admires, the Archbishop reflects on its best qualities.
Often I wonder why Toronto is so tolerant and so easy to live in. And I attribute that to its self-confidence, kind of an inner security. Now the Mass, the Eucharist, is being celebrated in 22 languages, and that is only in our diocese, our archdiocese. What will happen in the future, it's very difficult to say, because any predictions that we make them on the basis of our presuppositions today. I hope that Toronto grows organically, that it remains true to itself, and I'm sure that it will remain fundamentally the kind of city that it is.
He arrives at work, and at first glance, he looks for all the world like any businessman arriving at the office. But his business is unlike any other. There are, of course, the day-to-day concerns that come with the administration and management of a huge organization. The tasks any CEO would find familiar, the memos, the meetings, and the decisions. And then there is the planning and occasional crisis management. And all that adds up to more than enough of a job for one man. But His Grace has an extra challenge, another focus. He never loses sight of his real job and the calling that brought him to this office, a calling he first heard in the middle of war-torn Europe. It's rooted in his family's faith. But what actually brought him to this point?
A number of things. First of all, the family, obviously, because the family was very seriously religious. Not that I wouldn't say that we were terribly pious, but there were certain things that were simply taken for granted, like Sunday Mass, daily prayer, certain ethical things. So that was one thing. The other thing, obviously, was the war experience. For us all, the war experience was very strong, because I was 11 when the war began in Slovenia, and 15 when the war ended. Through that war, the one thing that we could depend on, interestingly enough, was the Catholic Church. That's the only thing that remained steady throughout this experience. These are the kinds of things that obviously occupy your mind and concentrate your mind. I thought of all sorts of things. Eventually, I decided on the priesthood. It was in '48, we came to Canada in 1948. And through a number of rather interesting circumstances, it was pretty well set that they knew that I intended to become a priest, so I wasn't needed by my family. So I entered the seminary immediately here. That was St. Augustine Seminary in Scarborough. So it was here. One highlight definitely is the first year. They sent me into a parish. I was in Port Colborne, and that was what I would call my pastoral honeymoon. I fell in love with the work of a priest. I liked it. The parish itself was what, in a sense, east side of Port Colborne was then already what Toronto is today, a very mixed population of Hungarians and Italians and Croatians. Oh, there was the odd Irish name also, and so on. So I felt very much at home, and I enjoyed myself. Well, then I went away to study. First in Rome, then I came back to teach, and then I went to Germany, and this was my second highlight. As far as I'm concerned, my doctoral study is in Germany between '67 and '70. Well, another highlight, obviously, is the Episcopal consecration. That was in '76. Somehow I had a tough time thinking of myself as bishop. It took me about 2 years to come to, not to terms, but just to see myself as a bishop. You think of yourself as a priest. By that time I was used to thinking of myself as a priest, but then it takes you a while to come to think of yourself as a bishop. So that definitely was also a highlight, but it was a highlight that took some getting used to. I was named coadjutor archbishop in '86. You see, once you're named coadjutor, you're automatic, the succession is automatic. So as soon as your predecessor retires, that's when you automatically become archbishop.
The Archbishop's friend, Joe Barnicke, knows the public and the private man.
He's a man that has opinions, and he definitely has leadership. And when he was selected to succeed Cardinal Carter, a lot of us that knew him were very happy that he was the one that was appointed. He's definitely a man that has views and very balanced judgment. Sometimes he might appear more formal, but that's not the case. He's a very warm person when you get out of the formal status. He's just you might call in layman's language, a great guy.
I think it's an important thing to be Archbishop of Toronto. On the other hand, you do know that, well, there are so many things you don't know, and in so many ways that you're inadequate. And then you hope that, well, things will go for the best.
His Grace, as being Archbishop, is really like having two jobs.
First of all, there is the administrative side. There are so many parishes that are responsible to me, that are sending reports in of one kind or another. There are a number of things that I wish to initiate. And again, I work through, of course, the Chancery office here, but then ultimately it's the parishes that do the work. Along with the administration, there's the personnel side, which is probably the most important, at least on the human level. It's the contact with the priests. And that, I would say, that is my most important job, in a sense. Because ultimately, they are the ones who are out in the field, and they are the ones who are doing the work. And I try to guide them. In order to guide them properly, I obviously need their counsel, their advice, because, well, they know the situation, they know the problems. So on the human level, I would say that my contact with the priests is the most important thing. Obviously, there are all sorts of other people that I have to contact with. For instance, people who are heads of the departments here. Sometimes certain problems come up. And so here we have, well, some are priests, some are laymen, some are laywomen, and so obviously that contact is absolutely necessary. There is what I would call the liturgical side, which obviously for a bishop is very important. It's the various celebrations in the cathedral, various celebrations elsewhere. Mass basically consists of two parts. The first part is what I call the Word. The second part is the sacrament. First part of the Mass is, that's where you have the readings from the Bible. That's where you have this homily, or the sermon. That's where you have the prayers also. This is a kind of a preparation a spiritual preparation for the most important part of the Mass, which is the second part, namely the reenactment of the Last Supper. And that's where the priest then, or the bishop, in this in my case, repeats the words of Christ, and in a real spiritual, obviously not physical manner, but obviously a real spiritual manner, that there is an identity between this event and the event of the Last Supper. It's the same Christ, and well, surrounded by his disciples, and that really is the heart of the Eucharist. It is the presence of the Lord under the forms of bread and wine. And then the disciples of Jesus around his table, again, not exactly in the same way, because there were only 12 at that time. Now there are sometimes 1,000 or more. But basically, the same thing is taking place. Jesus being with us and giving himself for us. Another aspect that I'm very much aware of in situations like that is the people, the other people who are there with me. The people who believe the same way as I do, people who, well, have their problems, every one of us, the basic human problems. And of course, then you're aware of the children. I have to say that crying children are always, I may as well say it, are a kind of a delight to me. One thing that I decided never to do as a priest was to complain about crying kids. Thank God that's one resolve I have kept. But what you try to do, basically what I try to do, is to be aware of Christ and be aware of the people.
On visits to Rome, the Archbishop is always impressed by the gifted and talented man who is Pope John Paul II.
Frankly, I think he's a genius. A genius, a very kind of rounded out genius. Because first of all, he's a man who has thought through, and that's what amazes me about him. He has thought through so many things.
Our thoughts turn today to our duty to teach the faithful the things which lead them to God, just as the Lord Jesus did.
Obviously, he studied and taught philosophy, and he has thought through the European, what I would call the intellectual turmoil that has accompanied Europe since the time of Enlightenment.
Living in a nation richly blessed in human and natural resources, Canadians have generally taken to heart their responsibilities to the less fortunate, especially the poor, the homeless, immigrants, and refugees. This tradition of solidarity, generosity, Christian hospitality now needs to be consciously nourished, taught and spread, so that Canada may continue to be a voice for justice and solidarity in the international community.
The other thing that amazes me is that self-confidence that he has. He is at ease with crowds. He is at ease with people.
A very nice Polish name. Very nice.
I walked into his office. Sure enough, this was, what, 12 o'clock. he had already seen a number of people before me. There was the president of Benin and his entourage, and then a number of bishops from various nationalities. He must have spoken at least 2 different languages that morning. He adapted himself to various personalities, and yet he was so extraordinarily relaxed.
The Pope looks out a lot. He looks towards the needs of the world, and he looks towards the responsibility of the Church to be alive, to represent the possibility of unity, of joy, of excitement in a world where death looms everywhere. And I think that this Archbishop has very strongly this sense. He is not interested in politics, internecine politics of the Church. He's not even very good at it, as a matter of fact. But he is really interested in the responsibility of the Christians in this town to manifest the joy, the strength of Christianity in a world that needs it. And I think that this is extremely important today.
Like His Holiness, the Archbishop finds spiritual solace and physical challenge in the outdoors.
Part of it undoubtedly is that I grew up in the outdoors. We had our farm, was a very small farm, but it was a farm in the foothills of Alps, so hills and dales, and wild animals were part and parcel of my growing up. Hiking for me is, I'm not a sportsman, because I grew up on a farm, so I never played sports very much. But I need to get physically tired. I mean, that is a psychological necessity for me. So, because it's only when I am thoroughly physically tired that I am fully relaxed. The first 2 hours I am ventilating my frustrations, and the last 2 hours I am becoming reconciled with the situation such as it is. So that by the end of it, it's almost like after a good sleep. The world looks better than it did at the beginning.
The Archbishop is not a sportsman, says Joe Barnicke, but he's a passionate fan of the Toronto Blue Jays.
Well, I don't go to the baseball game because I'm not a baseball fan. I always let him take his pals.
Yes, I follow Blue Jays. And I must say that the sport that does interest me is baseball. There's a tension about it. I don't know what it is about it. That I find that hockey releases tension too quickly. So somehow it doesn't get me. But baseball, you can sit at the edge of your chair for a long time and hope for something, and it doesn't happen.
The Archbishop's family is a great source of strength for him. Here, he's not just a leader of the Church, he's a brother and an uncle. It's a time when faith and family come together to reinforce each other.
I'm very closely attached to my family. I think we're all rather a tight unit, because we were lucky enough to have gone through, first of all, through the Second World War together, then through the displaced persons camps together, and then the first years in Canada together. And these were stressful years. And yet we were lucky enough, I mean, we were extraordinarily fortunate to be together all the way through. And so that obviously creates a bond that is not expressed, that is not thought of, that is just there. So we often find one another, my nephews and nieces of various, they obviously follow us in that regard, even though I'm sure that they get sick and tired of our reminiscing about the Second World War or whatever. I'm sure they do, but they do it with great grace, I must say. So I don't know how to put it. I know that no matter what happens, my 4 brothers and 2 sisters will be with me. I mean, they may disagree with me, they may be angry with me, but they're still with me. We meet often. It's usually on a weekly basis, once a week or once every 2 weeks at least. I'm at one or another. I'm at ease, I'm not trying to prove anything to anybody. I'm just there.
The Archbishop is a man blessed by the love of his family. It is both the wellspring of his faith and another expression of God's love. And so too are the rituals and traditions of the Church. For His grace, the celebration of Mass is a celebration of God's love for us all. That is what he carries in his heart. That is what he hears in the voices of the choir. And above all, that is what resonates in the words of the Gospels. Archbishop Aloysius Ambrozic. His personal faith is his public strength. It's a simple formula for leadership, yet it has the proven power to change the world.